Zooey Mama, how's it going everybody? I'm here to talk about the newest card coming to Marvel Snap. We have Sage coming out May 14th in spotlights along the Living Tribunal and Legion. Sage is a 3-cost, 0-powered card with the on-reveal ability to gain +2 power for each different power among all other cards here. Now, Sage was originally data mined as a 4-cost 1-power card. I thought she was going to be the worst card of the month, but I've since changed my thoughts now that she is a 3-cost card with a fairly high ceiling. Okay, every card on the location, including your side of the board and your opponent's side of the board, that has a different power, Sage will get +2. Okay, so any duplicated powers, maybe they played Brood, so you got Brood and the Broodlings who are all 2 power. She's only going to count that once, right? She'll count Brood's 2 power, but she won't count the others because they're copied. But other than that, she has a pretty high ceiling, so I'm going to go over her best synergies, some deck ideas for her, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and just give my overall thoughts on this Spotlight Week and on Sage herself. So let's get into it. So to start off with some of Sage's best synergy, Ravana. Ravana. Absolutely the best synergistic card for Sage. I think basically every deck you're going to be playing Sage, you do want Ravana. Okay, I don't think Sage is the most flexible card. I do think you generally want to play her like on turn 6, in which case you don't want too many 6-cost cards. But getting a 2/0 that can get all these +2 power stacks is going to be crazy, so I think you pretty much want her in every Sage deck. Next up, we're looking at White Widow. White Widow's doing something interesting. It's putting a 2-power card on your side of the board and putting either a -4 power or 0 power card on your opponent's side of the board. So if you just played White Widow and then Sage, Sage already has 2 targets there. Okay, it's got White Widow's 2 power and the Widow's Kiss at 0 or -4. So just good synergy there because it's multiple cards on the same lane. Next up, we've got a card like Jeff. Now this one may seem kind of interesting, but again, if you want Sage's max power, you're going to have to play her on turn 6. Or you play her early, maybe turn 4 or 5, on a location that you filled, which is normally bad. But if you filled it with cards that can move away, like Jeff, Nightcrawler, even Vision, if you got them out earlier, it's a 7-turn game, then your location isn't actually full, right? Because you can move that card out, but Sage still got the +2 power from having 3 other cards on her location. Now to talk about the good and the bad for Sage, let's start off with the good. What do we like about Sage? Well, she's got a high ceiling, okay? She could end up getting +14 power, right? You can fit 3 other cards on your side of the board for her location. Your opponent's side has 4 cards. So unless you did some like weird Wong shenanigans, playing her on a location, if all the cards on both sides of that location just happen to have unique power, she could be a 3/14. So good ceiling, and we'll talk more about this later. She's hard for your opponent to play around. They're just not going to play around it. Okay, maybe if they're in conquest mode and they see you played Sage, they might kind of think about it, but it's something difficult to play around. It's more about the cards that are just in your deck. And people play around Shang-Chi all the time. You're not going to be playing around your opponent's playing Sage. Okay, you're just not, even if she's fairly popular. She does work with Silver Surfer. Obviously, she's a 3-cost card. Even Surfer decks that use like Mr. Negative to be a negative Surfer, she works as well because she's a 3/0 that could become a 0/3. So good synergy there. She does benefit from some annoying locations that add cards. Okay, so normally locations like Central Park, which adds squirrels to the board, or the location that adds ninjas, -2 powered ninjas to both sides. Normally those locations are kind of annoying, but for Sage, that's a target for her to gain power. So even if you do play her before turn 6, that location is more full than it would have been without those normally annoying locations. And again, she's a pretty flexible turn 6 play, okay? You can play her alongside any other 3-cost card, or if you have Ravana down, you can play her alongside a 4-cost card, or if you had Iron Man, you can do Sage plus Iron Man if you had Ravana, right? There's a lot of things you can do here. You can really mix and match because she's just going to be good power in one lane, so you can focus another card on a different lane. Now to talk about the bad for Sage. Well, she has a low floor. I mean, technically she's a 3/0. That means she could just be 0 power. You're probably not going to play her as a 3/0, but it's possible, especially if you want to play her on curve, that maybe she's just like a 3-4. Okay, and we're going to talk more about this next. But she is just worse on curve. She's a 3-cost card that isn't great on turn 3. She's best on turn 6, and that's a little weird, right? Even if she gets to be like a 3-8, that's like the stats of Gladiator. But you can play Gladiator on turn 3 if you want, or you can play him on turn 6, right? Sage doesn't have that luxury. There's a downside, and it kind of limits deck building. And Sage has potentially unknown power if your opponent has priority. Okay, if they've got like 3 cards in the lane and it's turn 6 and you know they're going to play 4th card there, well, if it has unique power from all the other cards on that location, Sage would get an extra +2 if you played her on that lane and she revealed 2nd. But if it has the same power of at least one other card on that location, Sage isn't getting that +2. So you're playing a card and you're not sure how much power it's actually adding. Okay, that just adds levels of complexity and really unknown factors to what power you're going to have on the board, so that can be kind of bad in really close games. She obviously fears Shadow King, even if you got Sage to be like a 3-14 and then your opponent hit you with Shadow King, well, she's a 3-0 now. Okay, really countered by Shadow King. She's pretty niche, and her power is going to vary. Some games she'll do well if your opponent's playing a lot of different cards. Some games she won't do well if they have a slower deck or they're playing like Cerebro 2, right? They're only giving you 1 power to work with, and in that case, she's inconsistent. And then lastly, she might just power creep Wolfsbane, okay? And this isn't necessarily bad for Sage, but it's bad for the game. Maybe Wolfsbane is going to get buffed, because I think Sage will often hit 8 power or more. Yes, she has different requirements, but they're not too bad, I don't think. So I do think we have a bit of power creep there. And this is just my friendly reminder that if you're enjoying this video, to please give it a like and subscribe to the channel if you have not already, because we cover every single new card release in Marvel Snap. So let's get into Sage's floor and ceiling. So to look at Sage at her reasonable worst, I think she's going to just gain +4 power, okay? You're obviously going to play her in a deck that she works with. You're not going to play her in a deck and purposely play her on a location that's completely empty. That would be foolish. That would be your fault, not Sage's fault. You're going to try working some synergy with her, right? You're going to play a couple cards on a location and then play her. If you did decide to play her on curve, maybe you have bigger plans for turns 4, 5, and 6. You need to counter your opponent, or you need to play something bigger later, and you need to play her on turn 3. It's possible you just played like Iceman on turn 1 and Ravana on turn 2. That's a 2 power card, 3 power card, and then you play Sage on that lane and she's a 3-4. Okay, again, you really want to hold on to her, but if your hand's bad, you might just have to play her on turn 3 as a 3-4, and that's above the line of viable. It's not horrible. It is 4 power on the board, but it's obviously not very competitive. Okay, it still feels bad if you're just playing a 3-4 that does nothing else. Now, in terms of Sage's ceiling, her at her reasonable best, well, like I mentioned, she can get 14 power, and I don't think that's crazy. It's not going to be like a 1 in 1,000 thing. No, she's going to hit 14 power some games. Okay, you're going to play her on turn 6. Your opponent has priority. All the cards have different costs that will happen. I think often it might even just be like +10 or +12, but I think you will see +14 power, a decent amount to where it is a reasonable ceiling. And in fact, she's going to be a 2-14, because in this situation, you're playing her on turn 6 and you already have Ravana on the board. So she's a 2-0 that's gaining 14 power. A 2-14 is definitely above the line of overpowered. If she has a 2-14 every single game, that would be absolutely crazy. But where is Sage on average? Well, I think on average, she's getting 8 or 10 power. If you play her on turn 6, again, she's not a great turn 3 play. On turn 6, 8 or 10, especially if your opponent had priority, 8 power would mean that there were 3 cards there that had matching power, okay? Maybe, you know, there's 2 cards that have 2 power, 2 cards that have 3 power, and 2 cards that have 4 power. So even though I just named 6 cards, you're only counting 3 of them, you lose the other 3 because they're duplicate power numbers. And so she only gets +8, but that's still pretty good. It is inconsistent though. Okay, again, she's gonna be a 3-10 or 3-8, but you just don't know, especially at the start of the game. You don't know how big you're gonna ramp into, which means if your opponent snaps halfway through, do you stick around? If you think Sage could be a 3-10 or 3-12, maybe you stick around. If you don't think she will be, maybe you retreat. It's kind of hard, right? Especially when a snap comes into play. It's hard not knowing what the end game is going to look like for Sage. Now, to look at the decks I have prepared for Sage, first of all, I went to Safety Blade on Twitter. I took one of his recent decks he's been cooking up, he's been really liking. I modified it a bit to throw in Sage. Okay, I think I also threw an Iron Man. I'm not sure if that was in his list. But we've got stuff Sage loves here. We've got Ravana. That's a nice combo. Jeff, which I mentioned, you can actually use to temporarily fill Sage's lane. And even something like Nebula can be helpful. If you play Nebula, your opponents can start playing cards on Nebula's lane very early. Okay, if they play a 2-cost card that may has 3 power, into a 3-cost card with 4 power, into a 4-cost card with 6 power, I mean, they might just add a bunch of different powers on their side of the location. And because they're adding that power early, you might see it. I've also got White Widow in here, so Sage just works. And Nirvana's just discounting Sage, Wolfsbane, Iron Man, Professor X, Havoc, and Angela. I mean, so much value for Ravana here. This deck it's really hard to deal with. It can spit out a bunch of power with the Ravana discounts. And you've got good lockdown options with Professor X and Cannonball. So I know this one's just going to go pretty hard. Next up, I've got this Ravana Sarah Surfer list, and just like the last deck, this deck has no 6-cost cards. Okay, again, Sage likes being played on turn 6. You don't want her in a deck that has a bunch of 6-cost cards. So I've actually got Ravana in here as well. I think it's amazing synergy, as I mentioned. But Ravana is also going to work with Bishop, Patriot in here, which powers up Broods, or even if Absorbing Man hits Brood, he'll power up those as well, and Patriot gets buffed by Silver Surfer. And we've got Wolfsbane, okay? Also gets powered up by Silver Surfer and becomes a 2-1 with Ravana. And Absorbing Man actually has a lot of good targets here. Yes, you can hit Absorbing Man on Brood. You can also hit him on Silver Surfer, but you could also hit him on Sage. It's another good target for Absorbing Man, so I'm definitely excited to try out the Surfer list. And last up is this all-out Ravana Mr. Negative deck with Sage. Okay, so a lot of similar cards as we saw in the first list where I do have Ravana. I've got Havoc in here as well as Iron Man and Professor X because they're just great if you can get them at a discount. And so here, if you get Mr. Negative out, that's great. That's awesome. We're going to have a good time. Even if you don't get Mr. Negative out and you just have the Ravana discount, it's still enough. You can still lock down one lane. You can still do like Iron Man plus Mystique on the final turn, or you do Iron Man plus Sage. I mean, there is just great power to be had here. And obviously, if Sage does get flipped by Mr. Negative, she already starts off as a 0-cost 3-power card, which is even better. So to break down this Spotlight Week with Sage May 14th, she's coming out alongside the Living Tribunal and Legion, and you've probably already heard me rant and rave about these variants so much already, but first up, let's start with the token value. It's good. Living Tribunal is a Series 5 card, that's 6,000 tokens worth. Sage is obviously 6,000 tokens, she's a new card. And Legion is only Series 4, he's 3,000, so it's almost the best token value you can have for a Spotlight Cash. In terms of being competitive, it's good, okay? Sage we'll have to see, right? It is unknown. You could wait a couple days to see how strong she is. Even if she is good, it's not going to be in every deck because she's kind of niche. Living Tribunal, he goes in and out of the meta, but he's just a nice solid card and just great to have in your collection as well. Same thing with Legion. Legion is better in Conquest mode than regular mode, but in Conquest he's an amazing tech card. He can carry you. Also one of these cards you can just throw in depending on the meta. He could be really strong or just kind of solid, okay? But just another great card to have in your collection. And oh my goodness, I cannot stop talking about these variants. They're absolutely amazing, okay? The Sage variant, yeah, it's fine. It's cool, whatever. But I'm talking about Living Tribunal and Legion. This is the Ink Pulp Living Tribunal. It's probably his best variant. It's great, amazing colors. I love it. I want to see how it looks split. And this Legion variant, I have been farming boosters for Legion since I saw this was data mine. This is the Flaviano Legion. My goodness, it's incredible. My new favorite variant in the game. I'm going to go on before I keep talking about this Legion variant over and over and over. So to give my final thoughts and ratings on Sage, in terms of Sage's level of fun, yeah, she's okay. She is kind of just a stat stick, but you have to think about her, you have to plan around her, and it's even a bit more interesting than Wolfsbane because you got to look at the different power amongst cards there. You got to think of what your opponent's going to play. If their priority, is it going to be a higher power? Is it going to be the same power? How can I mess with my opponent's power to help out Sage, right? There's some thinking there. So it's kind of like a good stat stick. For a card that's just stats, it's fairly fun, okay? It has an okay level of fun. It's not completely boring. In terms of being flexible, no. Like I mentioned, I think you basically want Ravana in every single deck you have Sage. Think of the decks that Wolfsbane works. Sage kind of works in those same decks for the most part. Okay, obviously you wouldn't play Sage on top of your Brood like you might with Wolfsbane, but similar types of things. And you imagine if Wolfsbane maybe got to 8 or 9 power on the regular, what kind of plays you would see and in which decks. That's going to be very similar with Sage. We're not going to see her everywhere because she doesn't make sense everywhere. A turn 6 3-cost card just doesn't make sense in most decks. In terms of being competitive, yeah, I think she's good. Okay, I really do think she's strong. In the decks, she works. If you put her in any deck, she's not going to seem very good. She's going to seem bad. Okay, even in a Surfer deck, she can be risky. With Brood, you obviously have to know how to play her, and you have to be thinking about her and really setting it up, okay, which can be difficult to do. But in the decks, she's really built for, like the ones that already are using Ravana. Maybe if a deck's already using Wolfsbane, you can play like Wolfsbane and Sage on the final turn. She's going to be competitive because she's just good stats. Again, if you can get a 210, that's good. It's simple. That's good. If you get a 2-8, it's good. If you don't have Ravana, you just get a 3-10 or 3-12, it's good. I think she's fairly strong. But overall, I would not recommend getting Sage. Now, I think it's a great Spotlight week. Okay, if you're as excited for I am, you're going to be open cashers already. Because I'm going for this Legion variant. If you don't own Living Tribunal or you don't own Legion, it's a great time to pick it up. But if you do own those cards, and you're not looking to spend Spotlight keys on their awesome, amazing, super cool variants, then I don't think Sage herself is worth chasing after. Okay, if you're just looking at the Spotlight cash for this new card, I don't think she's worth it because she's niche. You could just play Wolfsbane, it'd be a little bit weaker, but she's just not needed. Okay, even if she turns out to on average have 10 or 12 power and she's really strong or she's overpowered, she's just going to get nerfed and then she's no longer needed because she's not actually that unique. She just works a bit differently than Wolfsbane. So I don't think she's worth chasing after. I know a lot of people are holding keys from most weeks this month, waiting for June. I think that's a good strategy here unless you're chasing after Living Tribunal or Legion, as I mentioned. So let me know your thoughts on Sage. Let me know if there's any cool deck ideas that I didn't think about that you've been brewing and brainstorming. Let me know just what you think her best combos and synergies will be. And until then, stay positive. I'll see you next time.